John Deere, I don't know what they're like now. I worked at a John Deere dealership in the 80s, and actually the prices were pretty darn good. They're pretty competitive. You could get a John Deere filter just about as cheap as any filter you get anywhere else. I don't know if it's still like that today, but in the interest of saving trips, you do the same thing. You get the Napa number for the John Deere, and then you cross that Napa in the big box retail stores filter guide, and in the cross-reference section in the back, and you can come up with a number and use a $2.76 filter instead of a $5, $6, $7 filter. It not only saves you a couple of bucks, but it saves you a separate trip to the John Deere store. You only have to go one place to buy your filters. All right, check this out, sports fans. I got this light here that I put up on my workshop. It's just made out of junk, okay? No money invested. But I had one of these inline switches, okay? And they're pretty easy to put in. You cut one wire, you spread the wires apart, cut one, and run the oil on one side. But it's got this little teeny nut, really teeny, okay? So I'm putting it back together, and sure as shit, I dropped that sucker on this dirt floor. Well, you know there's no way you're gonna be able to find it, right? Gave up all hope. Just out of desperation, take an old speaker magnet, and I just started prodding the ground like that. And lo and behold, I found it. So as long as I'm on the subject of speaker magnets, these things are just the most fantastic thing for storing parts when you are working on something. When you're taking out screws and you don't want, you put them in a bowl, you bump the bowl, it's gone. But you put them on the speaker magnet, even if you bump the magnet, it ain't going. And yeah, they get crud on them, okay? And the easiest way to clean that off is wrap it against something pretty solid. That'll get rid of all the iron filings when you use it for something like I did there for picking up a lost screw out of the dirt. But they're darn handy and they're free. You know, just about everybody's got a buddy who blew up a set of speakers in his car. Well, the magnet's still good. Cut that off and you'll find 1,000 uses for that. All right, sports fans, just got back from the store. Checked out the price of a Kohler oil filter, and now they're up to 10 bucks. They're up to 10 bucks. In the exact same store, the exact same filter, Purelator, $2.76. Usually $3, but they were $1 off today. I didn't even have time to check on the John Deere filter, but I bought it. $2.76 for this. Like I said, I didn't have time to stop at the John Deere dealer. Looks like Purelator updated. They went to red, so probably make it a little more high performance. So what I got to do left on these machines is I got to run them, get them warm so I can drain the oil and put fresh oil in them. I'm also checking the air filters. You know, the greatest thing they ever came up with on these filters for lawnmowers is this foam. It really keeps the paper cleaner, makes it last a lot longer. So I just wash these out with gas, wring them out with my hand, put a little dab of oil on them, wring them again, and geez, you can reuse them a whole bunch of times, and it just keeps the crud out of the paper filter, like the dandelion seeds and things of that nature. Boy, you get a lot more mileage out of an air filter that way. Check this one on the Skag here. And actually that one probably gonna buy a new one. I should have probably checked this before I went to the store, but I'll go there again. You can't even see light through that paper. So that bad boy, that's probably time to be new. So next trip to the store, that one gets a new air filter. John Deere's okay. Now you can buy a lot of oil drain pans at a store, but you are going to be hard pressed to beat the 1 gallon antifreeze jug with the top cut off it or the side cut off it, whatever you want to say. They're free. If you lose them, if you ruin them, it's no big deal, and they hold have just the right amount of capacity for these small gas engines. You know, you can just see right here, you know, a big oil drain pan for your car, that really isn't gonna be much help for you. So we'll sit there and let that drain, and we'll go check out this machine. 12-point sockets. You hate them, I hate them. They strip nuts and bolts. But what they are handy for, you can see that drain plug there, that's got a square head on it. 12 is divisible by 4 and 6. So a 12-point fastener will grab a 4-sided fastener just as well as it'll grab a 6. So in that respect, there is some use for a 12-point socket. It's about the only time I ever use them. One other thing here on these small gas engines, they're almost always aluminum blocks, and so you got a steel drain plug going into a aluminum oil pan or engine cover, whatever you want to call it. You tighten these things up too tight. This is pipe thread, and it's tapered, and it's just like a wedge splitting it apart. You want to know how I know? That's the problem with this machine right here, and that is why we have the big puddle of oil under this machine right here, and it was a dripping, and for several years, just added oil when I needed it. Well, I'm done with that, so I'm gonna pull the engine and eliminate that problem once and for all. All right, remember me telling you how this oil filter said it had 1,750 hours since its last oil change? And the hour meter, however, says almost 2,500 hours, and I'm going, no way, no way. This machine, that would have been, let's see here, 800 hours since the last oil change, right? 300, 1,700, and 3, yeah, about 800 hours since the last oil change. This machine doesn't even have 800 hours on it total. There's something funky going on with that hour meter. I don't know what it is, but you certainly can't trust it. And just for fun, I took the oil that I drained out of this and poured it in here. Now, you look at that, and geez, if that was hundreds of hours of oil, that would look like black paint, and it's still fairly clear. So when you see it drip, you know, it's brown rather than black. So I guess I just can't trust that hour meter. But we're going to change the oil anyway because it hasn't been changed since, when was that, 2013? Like I say, I don't put very many hours on that machine a year, probably, what, 15 hours a year maybe? So going to be using it a little bit more now, though, when I rebuild my zero-turn rider, so want to have that ready to rock and roll. So we will give it a proper oil. All right, once again, I took the oil filter off that John Deere, and I don't know if you can see it, but look, I wiped up the excess oil with a rag, and that's pretty saturated right there. If that was 600-hour oil, that would be black. That would be like black paint. And rag's about the same color as if you spilled fresh oil on it. So I can't explain the 600-hour increment on the hour meter since last oil change. I can't even explain the 1,750 from the oil change before that. But I tell you one thing, these units make a hell of a mess when you take out the filter. I think next time I do it, I will drill a hole in the filter and let the filter drain, because it just spews oil all over hell. Maybe they'll have some tips in the owner's manual about how to do that. I'll take a look at that when I look up to see how much oil it takes. It's probably going to be around 2 quarts with the filter. Most of these small air-cooled engines are about 2 quarts, the ones that take filters. I know the Kohlers are, the single-cylinder Kohlers are 2 quarts, and the twin cylinders are also 2 quarts. Interesting thing on this machine, this engine is a Kohler Command, which is a pretty darn good engine. The original engine in this was a Kohler Magnum, which is probably the worst small air-cooled gas engine ever made. They were just terrible. If you don't believe me, go to any John Deere dealership and ask them what they think of the John Deere 317 garden tractor. They were just terrible motors for so many different reasons. The Kohler Command, the twin cylinder, it's night and day. I can't say enough good things about these engines, these Kohler engines. If I had a complaint with them, they don't start. They don't want to start when it's cold. Not a very good engine for a snowblower or any type of snow removal machine. They just do not like to start when it's cold. They'll start with either, but you try just starting them by themselves, you're going to be doing a lot of cranking. The John Deere here's got a Kawasaki. John Deere with the Kawasaki engines on a lot of their products in the mid-80s. Kawasaki engines are the experience I've had with them. In fact, this engine here originally, this Skag mower originally had a Kawasaki motor on them. And they're great when they're new, but once you rack up the hours on them, oh boy. I don't know if the compression release stops working or what, but it gets to the point where it's just about impossible to pull the cord, you know, without having to kick back on you. They're just damn hard to start when they're old. Kawasaki, they're great when they're new, but I'm not a big fan of them when they're old. The Kohlers they do pretty good when they're old, but like I say, the downside of the Kohler is they don't like to start in cold weather. Fortunately, the grass doesn't grow in the winter, so it's not a problem for. All right, so I looked it up in the owner's manual, and it's right. It's 2 quarts with the filter, and as long as we're talking about filters, I scratched the date and the hours on a filter. Some people write it out with a Sharpie, but geez, an oily environment gas, you know, that might make it come off. If you scratch it, it ain't gonna happen, and your writing isn't gonna go anywhere. Obviously, you want to scratch it in before you put the filter on the machine, because it's kind of difficult to do it in that situation. You might just want to use a Sharpie, I suppose. I always scratch it. Now, I got the hours on, excuse me, 2,500 hours, and like we were talking about before, I mean, that's totally meaningless, except for one thing. I'm going to be checking that hour meter. I know it's got 2,500 on the hour meter when I change this filter. By the end of this season, that's only going to be 2,525 hours. So 25 is what it should end up being. I'll keep track of how many hours I actually use it. But if that hour meter keeps going up at the same rate, this thing will probably say 3,000 hours. And there's no way I'm putting 500 hours on this in a season. It's just not happening. As long as I'm adding oil, I thought I'd mention something about oil. What kind of oil should you get? In my opinion, whatever you can get cheapest. You know, you'll hear people say, oh, if you start with one brand, you have to stick with it. No, you don't. Get whatever's cheapest. But as far as brands go, you'll hear people running down Pennzoil and saying this other oil is great. Believe me, it's all fine. You know, you watch the Indy 500, and quite often they'd have the ad where the oil used in this Indy racer is the exact same oil that you can put in your car. Well, if some top-of-the-line brand name oil is good enough for an Indy car, then I would say just about anything you can find will be good enough for your car or your garden tractor. So yeah, don't go spend a lot of money on oil. It's just not worth it. If you got a brand new car, you know, $50,000 machine, yeah, then you might want to put in some synthetic oil. You know, what's the difference? After you spend $50,000, what's spending $20 more on every oil change? But on anything else, particularly your cheap car, your lawn and garden equipment, you're not going to get any benefits at all by spending a lot of money on oil. Just get whatever's cheap. All right, I'm getting that wood off that trailer from tearing down my son's tree house, and it had to go somewhere. So in order to take care of that, I had to reorganize my wood rack, kind of clean it up. So I got 4x4s on one level, planks on the bottom, no planks on the bottom, then 4x4s, then 2x6s and 2x4s, and then 1x lumber. So it's going to be easier to find stuff. Plus, I got a lot more stuff in the same space. Virtually everything that was on that trailer is now on this wood rack. Like I say, storing building materials, they don't take up much space. We got a splice 4x4 here, and these are ring shank nails pounded on this 2x4 splice on both sides. So you might wonder how the heck, if you ever want to take something apart, like this apart, how the heck you would do it. The easiest way to do it is take a circular saw and just make cuts with the blade 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches deep. So you just cut the 2x4 and cut in between each of the nails, and then you can take a chisel and you can just knock the wood out. It's easy as hell. And sometimes with, like I say, with ring shank nails. It's the only way you can do it. I tried fighting with it to see if I could do it with just brute force, and it's just not happening. So I'll show you how to do that. First thing we got to do is got to put a wood blade in our saw. You know, whenever you grab a tool, it always seems like it has the wrong blade in it. Now I got a metal cutting blade on here. I can't even remember why I had it in there, but just for people that don't know, if you don't have a chop saw or metal cutting saw, a metal cutting blade in a circular saw will work pretty good. And now that I look at this, I see that's a masonry blade, and now I remember what this was for, why I had this in here. I had to score some bricks to cut them in half. So, but a metal cutting blade looks very similar to that. So that's the deal there. So now I'll switch blades out and I'll show you how to take care of that unsplicing a splice 4x4. All right, as long as I'm changing blades, I'm going to show you something here. The blade is held on with this bolt and special washer with a square hole and then a skill saw. The reason I mention that is skill saws, they're not the best saws in the world, and I abuse them. I used to abuse them really bad when back before I had the chop saw. Cutting metal and cutting masonry with a skill saw, it's hard on them. It gets all kinds of dust in the motor, and it eventually ruins them. I went through a number of them until I finally got myself a chop saw. But when I had the skill saw and it died, I saved these square washers and these blade bolts. Look how many skill saws I killed. Okay, there's one. Turn on my light so you can see. So there's one I killed. There's 2, 3, 4, and then here's the bolts for them. So I just keep them there so I don't lose them. So I've killed 4 skill saws over the course of time. No, that's over the course of 20, 30 years, but I could have bought a better quality saw, you know, so they wouldn't burn out so easy, and I did. I finally did once. I bought a Makita. I thought, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to get a good tool, enough of these cheap skill saws. Well, I had this Makita saw for about, I bet it was less than 6 months. Less than 6 months. You can keep one of these skill saws in the back of your truck. No one will take it, okay? They're certainly not going to break your window to steal it if you got it locked inside your truck. You got a Makita saw, they walk away, okay? So I had this Makita saw for about, I'd say 6 months. And I think what happened, I borrowed it out to somebody. I lent it to someone, and they never brought it back. And I can't even remember who I lent it to. But geez, if I would have lent them a skill saw, I wouldn't even cared if they didn't bring it back. So there's the upside of having some cheap tools sometimes. You don't seem to lose them as easy. They don't walk away as easy. So that's the story there. All right, I set this circular saw to the depth of a 2x4, and I'm just going to cut here, 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 and there, and then I'll knock out the pieces with the cold chisel. It works slicker than hell. Just check this out. All right, now check this out. And that was one-handed. Imagine how easy it would be two-handed. But basically all you can do is pretty much line your chisel up with where the nail is, and then just pound the chisel through, split the board, and look how easy it's going to be to pull that nail out now. So just a really easy way to take apart lumber that you thought you might not be able to take apart because it was held together with ring shank nails. Yeah, you will have to sacrifice part of a board to do it, but you know, if you figure the 4x4s are worth more than the 2x4 and you're saving them, this is the way to go.